Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my ongoing series about books that will change the way you see the world or just cannot recommend enough. And as promised, The Eye in the Door, the second installment in Pat Barker's Regeneration Trilogy. And it is every bit its predecessor's successor, and trying to say it's like its father, it is every bit its father's son, or mother's daughter. Anyway, it carries on in the story, and it really gets into some very very vital aspects of the history of World War One and what was going on in society at the time, in British society. And to me, this book contained a little bit of a surprise there, which was they revealed which character from the original was the fictional one and is, for all intents and purposes, the main character now. And that's Billy Pryor, the guy who had selective mutism on account of just terrible trauma that he witnessed involving an eyeball. And yeah. Now, others who were more prepared, I guess, reading the first book, they may have already known that. Hard to say. I'm sure today anyone who listened to the podcast before they read the book, or as several people I know are tend to do, yeah, they would have known that in advance. But for me, I just waded in, and this was how I learned about that. So, some very pivotal things have happened, right? Where we left off, we were in Craiglockhart Castle, or sanatorium. It's converted castle, and we saw the four main characters there, Siegfried Sassoon and Wilfred Owen. Both of them have been discharged and are back at the front, although Sassoon has come back in this book for to kick around a little. And Dr. Rivers, he is continuing to treat patients. He speaks to Billy Pryor, also discharged, who is now in London working for the Ministry of Munitions as part of an intelligence unit. And so he's getting an inside look at how British society has really become a lot more inwardly focused thanks to the war. And the timing of this book is really, really key. If anyone's familiar with the history of World War I, you know that the spring of 1918 was extremely pivotal. By 1917, it was obvious to all sides that the war was just not going well. And interestingly enough, whereas the Western Allies were thinking, oh God, we could lose this war. Those U-boats are harrying our commercial ships. We're experiencing shortages. We've lost a lot of people. There was even a breakdown in morale, soldier riots after the Battle of Verdun. And the British similarly went through the Somme, and it was just a bloody meat grinder. And so there were genuine concerns at that point that the Allies could lose the war. But by the spring of 1918, more had happened that kind of reinforced that feeling. Side note there, Germany was having the exact same feelings, right? They had been trying to break out of encirclement since the beginning of the war. Verdun for them was a huge gamble. I'm dropping a lot of battle names here. Maybe I should not do that so much. But if you are familiar with the history of it, yeah, these names will ring a bell. The point is, after all this attrition and the fact that they were under a naval blockade, right? Their U-boats were an attempt to hit back at British shipping and so forth, and cause the same effect, just making sure that they couldn't get supplies, food, and fuel from their overseas empire. But yeah, Germany was effectively blockaded, so they had been rationing from the beginning, and at this point, it was, things were not going so good. I recall hearing that, when the war began, potatoes were recommended as the staple food for the family. Whatever else you could get, fine, but it is being rationed. But potatoes were recommended. But at this point, they were running short on potatoes, and they were saying, turnips, use those. Cook up those. They're not so awful. the professor who was saying this felt that, yes, they definitely are awful. So, suffering. And so, another big thing for them, though, something that gave Germany a ray of hope was by the fall of 1917, you had the Russian Revolution. And initially, the provisional government, which took over from the Tsar, the communists had not yet secured power. They promised all kinds of change to the Russian people. They had a lot of support, but they decided, rather fatally, to stay in the war. And their provisional leader, an officer named Alexander Kerensky, which is a very cool name as far as I'm concerned, and I've used it in the course of my own writing. Yeah, Kerensky, he was, his military background did have something to do with this, I'm sure. He felt that, yes, our duty is to our allies here. We can't give up on them. You know, it'd be a disgrace, and we're a new fledgling government. And so, yes, it was a bit of a test, but unfortunately, that is what it undermines support for the provisional government. And Lenin and his minions, they saw an opportunity, and so they seized control of the government. And one of their first acts, certainly their very first foreign policy act, was to get the Soviet Union now out of the war. So they had surrendered lots of territory in the east, and by 1918, the German divisions that had been stationed in the east were now being transferred to the west. And so that led to the Spring Offensive, where Germany threw everything they had with these reasonably fresh reinforcements. They had been fighting over there, but yeah, they'd been rested up. And they launched a massive offensive, and once again, they were capturing large swaths of territory. So, yeah, France and Britain, for them, it was like, we need to hold the line here, because at this point, the Americans had become involved. But of course, it would take them time to ship troops from overseas. And so it was a little while. But American forces did get a taste of the Spring Offensive. Belle-Île Wood, where some U.S. Marines stood strong against repeated German attacks. That was part of the Spring Offensive. That and a few other actions. So the troops were showing up. It just, yeah, it was taking time. And the Spring Offensive did last for a little while there. Anyway, pause here to mention what I'm drinking. L'Effet Blonde. And seems appropriate because Flanders, man. Leffe is, I don't know exactly where they're headquartered, but they're an Abbey beer. They're Belgian. And, yeah, we like them in my family. They remind us of our family trips that we took in 2014, 2016 to see the Commonwealth cemeteries, the monuments, and, of course, just, kick around in Europe. We got to see Ypres multiple times on both trips. And I got to tell you, it's an amazing town. It's so cool. More on that later. And so, Billy Pryor here, what he is required to do is they're basically investigating possible treason, sabotage, disloyalty, anything there, because, like I said, British society had really turned inward. They were losing the war, or that's how it felt anyway, and they're afraid of losing the war. And basically, they understood that, as any country tends to do, as any civilization does when it's facing military defeat, it starts looking for scapegoats. It starts looking to blame people within their ranks, right? Why are we losing? Who's weakening us here? Who's not pulling their weight? And yeah. And this meant that two groups in particular were being scapegoated and attacked because of their unwillingness to go to war or what have you. And one was pacifists. And that was a theme that had been going on throughout the war. There had been conscientious objectors in World War I from the beginning, and they were treated as cowards. So they were punished or forcibly conscripted. And a famous example of how British society, they were hostile towards pacifists, was the White Feather Campaign. Young ladies were given white feathers and went around, and when they saw a person who was of eligible military aid, who wasn't a soldier, wasn't wearing a uniform or what have you, they gave them a feather, basically saying, "Oh, hello, why aren't you in uniform, coward? Here you go. Wear it like a very disgraceful symbol." The other major scapegoat at this time, unsurprisingly, was homosexuals, who were accused of treason and, well, all manner of things. But from the point of view of the intelligence services and the security services, these individuals could not be trusted because they were leading double lives, and that made them subject or vulnerable to blackmail. And I was interested to see that, because that's the exact same, like verbatim, excuse that was behind the lavender scare of the 1950s, where, yeah, it was under Eisenhower, but yeah, Nixon was big into this, so was McCarthy. It was part of the larger Red Scare, right? We're purging homosexuals because we don't like them and we don't trust them, and we think they're secretly communists, or we're worried that, yeah, they'll be blackmailed based on they don't want this information to get out. And it's like, it's a ridiculously, hilariously sort of circular logic. It's like they're vulnerable to blackmail. Why? Because they don't want their secret to get out. Why is it a secret? Because we'll persecute them. Ah, that sounds like a you problem. Stop persecuting them and they won't be compromisable. Anyway, obviously that policy, though, it is something that's landing very close to home for Pryor and others, because, of course, Siegfried Sassoon is gay. Wilfred Owen is gay. They're both soldiers. Dr. Rivers knows about this, but is keeping that private on the down low, like a good doctor. And Pryor himself, as we learn in this story, I think I neglected to mention last time around, he has a girlfriend. He's met a lovely Scottish girl up in the north while at Craig Lockhart. She works in the munitions factory, and she's part of a generation of women that are pulling their weight and enjoying it. They're enjoying sort of the independence that it offers. And this was something that was very, very common by the early 20th century and even earlier, just late 19th century. Women found that working in factories, in peacetime or in war, but wartime really accentuated that. There was a lot more women working in heavy industry. Excuse me. Turn up the fan there. So, she is one such woman, and she was raised by a single mom, and basically her mom worries about her, but she's like, "Mom, you're just worried because the block chipped." Which is to say, I'm a chip off the old block. So, yeah. And she met Billy Pryor, and initially, of course, she was cautious and so forth, but they did fall in love, and now they're courting. But Billy Pryor has a secret. He also likes to have sex with men. And it does appear to be related to a childhood trauma. He had been molested by a priest. And as a result, so yeah, basically it's like learned behavior. He's repeating a pattern, but he is the top in this. In the parlance of gay men and gay sex, he is what you'd call a power top. And one of the first things that happens in the story is he is walking the streets of London. He still has a lot of trouble sleeping, right? Like most of the traumatized soldiers. And there was an option for them. They're called bromine shots. But they would put you to sleep, no problem, but you'd have nightmares. It was quite typical of them. Something about the chemicals just put you in a bad state, and if you're a traumatized soldier, your nightmares are very real. So he decided instead he's out walking, smoking a cigarette, and he sees this captain, and shares a cigarette with him. And of course, you can tell that this guy, Captain Manning, is gay. They retire to his house where they have sex, and he can tell that the captain is very much paranoid and shifty about what he's doing, because, yeah, if anyone found out, especially at this time there, he would be in the stockade. And, yeah, Pryor suspects that he is, in fact, being blackmailed by somebody. So they continue to see each other, but Pryor's main task right now, he's handed a case where an old friend of his from back in his hometown, named Beatty Roper, has been arrested on the charge of plotting the assassination of Prime Minister Lloyd George. And he starts looking into it, and he's thinking, that's not possible. Her? It's like, yeah, she's a pacifist, no doubt, but this an assassination, that can't be right. So he's looking into it, and he finds that an officer who also works for the Ministry of Munitions, named Sprague, he was posing as a military deserter, made contact with her, and that's how the plan got going. And Pryor can smell a setup here. It's like, yeah, she wasn't plotting anything here. You came to her and you started pushing for this and so forth. And she did, however, mention some things that kind of, well, that were used against her for the sake of her arrest, where she and Pryor gets to go speak with her. And basically she says that, yes, all I did was talk about the dogs. And he's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, this guy was telling me all about, Lloyd George and the security and so forth, and how there would be guard dogs. And she mentioned she happened to come up with an idea of how the dogs could be poisoned. And so, yeah, they wouldn't be a problem. But she was speaking, in the abstract. So, yeah, she was set up, and Pryor believes that absolutely that she was targeted because they figured she's the weakest link in the circle, because of course there are others there. And so Pryor follows the evidence to his old hometown and to Beatty's friend, their mutual friend, a guy named Mac. And he is supposed to be part of this cell, and he's supposed to be held out there. And his first contact, he goes to Beatty's house and talks to the daughter, and who is also a pacifist. Her husband is anti-war. He's outspoken on that. And he's saying to her, do you know where I could find Mac? And she says, I haven't seen him, but he can tell she's been hiding him. So he does not decide to do he doesn't press her or anything like that. He figures, oh, Mac's hiding here. He knows I'm here. He'll find me. And so he goes to the local park where they used to play, and Mac does indeed show up. And they talk, and Mac is very adamant. He's like, don't turn me in. Don't turn me in. I'll kill you if I have to. Don't turn me in. And he decides he's not going to betray his friend, and it's not because he's threatening him. It's like, I don't buy any of this. This really isn't working for me. However, Pryor is also dealing with another sort of intrigue of his own. He's noticed that since he got out of Craig Lockhart, since he began working for the Ministry of Munitions, he's experiencing lost time. He has memory lapses. It's like, wait, how did I get here? What's going on here? What time is it? I've lost 6 hours? And so, yeah, there's somebody else, as he's learning, sort of takes over when that happens. And I thought, okay, on top of everything else here, he's got a split personality. That's seems to be what they're doing there. It's not enough that he has got war trauma, that he secretly has sex with men because of childhood trauma. Now split personality too. Oh my God, this guy is so messed up. But in fact, it's actually a brilliant metaphor for the British society at the time. It's like, when he is this other self, he is apparently a lot more rigid and pro-war. and has very low opinions of the people who are opposing it. And so they are, sorry, I lost my place here. So yeah, this represents how British society was feeling at the time, right? It's like, we're in a war, we want to win it, we want to support the troops on the front lines and all that stuff, but holy crap, man, the trauma that we're seeing, the destruction we're seeing, the loss of life, it makes one want to just revolt and say, screw this, end this war. We don't give a crap about any of the war aims or so forth, And yeah, pride be damned. Whatever glorious purpose we had when we got into it, or so we thought, all that be damned. And so, yeah, his own split personality, his own sort of schizophrenic nature at this point, it is very much a symbol for, yeah, just how Britain is very much divided, and it's like it's two sides that are fighting with each other, and therefore, in a metaphorical sense, the nation is very much in a spiritual war with itself. Anyway, so we see Sarah, his fiance now. They are together, and they're out on a date, and he finds that Sprague is tailing him. So he tells Sarah, wait here, I'm going to go, talk to this guy. However, he experiences lost time when doing this. As he goes to confront Sprague, suddenly it's like, whoa, what happened? And he's with Sarah again. Sprague is nowhere to be seen. And he says, what did I do? What happened there? And she's seen this before, I think, and she tells him that, yeah, you were different now. And when you are this other state, you are more pro-war. And when we were out and you look around at people who are like able-bodied and military age, but they're not off at the front, you get resentful, you get mad, you want to know, what the hell, man? How are you here? And so he's getting rather paranoid. Another thing that's very, very much a part of this book, very much a part of the times. And he goes to see Dr. Rivers, whom he still sees with on occasion. He still goes to, has sessions with on occasion. So he sees Rivers, and they manage to trace the root of these episodes. And yes, it is something. It's about childhood trauma. His father was abusive. He was abusing his mother, and yeah, it's like another part of him took over, and I believe that part of him attacked his father, like, don't hurt my mother. And so yeah, he's got this sort of other self there that has been around, and it's been coming out lately because of his job, which he does not like. But that's where he's stationed, rather than being sent back to the front right away. And this was typical practice. Soldiers with neurasthenia, as they called it, what we today would call post-traumatic stress disorder, they were treated, and when it was deemed that they were good to go, yeah, they would typically get assigned to some kind of detail where they're not at the front lines. And yeah, if everything was going well, back you go. Or if we just need reinforcements badly, back you go. So they do that, and then there is this then quirky part where he then reverses the roles with Dr. Rivers and starts cheekily asking him, what are you repressing? What are you repressing? And there's a part there where Dr. Rivers is talking and realizing in his sessions with Siegfried Sassoon, who's being open about his homosexuality and so forth, Dr. Rivers feels something. He's like, I'm not immune to those feelings myself. Just a certain love of my fellow man, which can at times border on the homoerotic. And that is something that is extremely dangerous to do in a society this day and age, right? But yeah, I do believe it was included there to show that, yeah, well, sexuality is kind of fluid. And yeah, so no one's immune to the other side of things, right? In any case, what happens next is Pryor finds out that Mac, yes, police have gone to his old hometown and they've arrested him. And so Pryor, he goes to visit him, and Mac is saying, you turned me in. You must have done it. And Pryor's like, I didn't do a thing. I never did a thing here. I can't. I told you I wouldn't, and I was true to that. But he comes to realize, with the help of Sprague, he sees Sprague again, and beats him up. And Sprague's like, "What the hell's the matter with you? 1 minute you're talking about cooperating and collaborating, you're giving me names. Next minute you're doing this." And Pryor's like, "Whoa, I gave you names? Who? Who did I give you?" And yes, he realizes he turned Mac in. And so that breaks his heart, and he is very much, very, very much hurt by it all. And this brings us to, the title, The Eye in the Door, right? Which represents basically espionage, You fear the eye in the door there, you think you're being watched. And yes, there that kind of intrusiveness, people looking in on others to see what their activities are, what secrets they have. And also, it captures the paranoia and the sort of insular, inward-looking nature of Britain during the spring of 1918. And how all this relates to the fact that they were very much worried that they were going to lose the war. That fear was becoming very tangible. And I want to say a little bit more on that, but I'll save that to the end. So anyway, after the arrest is made and so forth, Pryor's unit is disbanded, and he has now got the option to do what he wants. And Captain Manning, who is now very chummy with him, right? They are having sex. He offers him a job. He offers him a ministry job in the department that he is working for. Don't rightly recall which one, but it's a government job and it's safe. And so he says, "I can get you a job there. You'll be set up. You'll have pay, and you'll get to stay." And Pryor says no, and decides that he wants to go back to the front. He is feeling guilty. He's been struggling with the feeling of, I shouldn't be away when my colleagues, all my friends and fellow soldiers, they're still there fighting and dying. And of course, that was something that came up a lot in the first book there, especially with Sassoon, because, as we mentioned, Sassoon was at that mental hospital, not because he was showing all the signs of neurasthenia, but because he had some powerful friends who pulled strings. He had become a war rejectionist there. He became an outspoken critic of the war, and that would have got him hung, shot, or something, or put in jail. So his friends, they convinced the military tribunal that, in fact, no, it's not that. He's just crazy. He's just crazy. He needs time to rest. So he was taking advantage of that. But eventually his conscience got to him, and he's like, "I got to go back, man. This is a farce." And so that really plays to the whole thing here. And again, it was something that came up with Wilfred Owen when they're talking about when he and Sassoon are working on poems together, and that. Those scenes were really cool, of course, because these poems are real. And based on some kind of notes or something there, not sure how Barker reconstructed this, but she had she'd written scenes where, and could have just been her imagination, right? But you have scenes where Sassoon and Owen are talking about the poems that they're composing, and Sassoon's the teacher, Owen's the student. And they're talking about his poem, Anthem for Doomed Youth. And he said to him, you got a bit of a contradiction here. It's like, the whole thing is, there's no consolation, no trumpets, no glorious big celebration for these doomed youth. There's just the cacophony of the guns, the explosions of the shells, right, and the horrible mucking conditions. But at the same time, he's like, you're also sort of describing here, like they're self-consoling. There's something where the soldiers consoling themselves. And so they debated that, and Owen's like, well, no, it's not consolation. It's like pride and sacrifice. Courage is being misused, yes, but it's still courage. And that was something very true of the war. It's like for the veterans, it's like, this is horrible, this is terrible, we hate war, never want to see it again. But at the same time, as long as this is happening, as long as our people are here suffering, any person could be forgiven for wanting to get the hell out of there, post haste. But knowing that, your friends are left behind. So it's like, yeah, we still have a duty to do. We still have to win this thing. We still have to end this horrible war before it claims any more of us. And that is something that, book 3, events that were taking place there, they follow from this, because, in fact, Germany's spring offensive, it did not go according to plan, right? They did what they typically did throughout the war, and it's what they did in the Schlieffen maneuver, and it's why they failed to secure Paris and got counterattacked and, stalemate and 4 years of trench warfare later. They had their stormtroopers, their shock troops, who would travel light. They would leave heavy munitions and so forth behind. They had their rifles, they had their Stalag grenades, and they had flamethrowers, and they were equipped to move very rapidly to make shock attacks along the front, disrupt the enemy, secure large swaths of territory. But then it's like, okay, well, when they're done, that's great. We now have to move in after them. We have to secure and occupy that territory. And, the guns got to move with them, all the heavy supplies and all that stuff, you got to move that up. And the problem is like, while you're doing that, the French guns and the British guns, right, you push them back, but their artillery is just opening up on you, and it's killing the shock troops. That is what happened at Verdun. And, the Battle of the Marne, during their attempt to seize Paris, and then inevitably counterattack. And so by the time the offensive was over, and they didn't have actual immediate objectives. It was just like push, we're trying to get to Paris. But they got as far, and I've been to this place, they got as far as Amiens is the place where I've been. That was their ultimate goal, to get to that town. They managed to get to one that is not that far away, and similarly old town, historic, And I remember in Amiens we visited the cathedral, and they had pictures of how they had fortified the cathedral. Right, it's like put extra support beams against the walls, build up sandbags. But the German offensive never made it that far. And so, at that point, it was like, okay, they have run out of steam. Our front lines have taken a beating, the British and French were saying. But we now have the benefit of reinforcements from the States. They are fully deployed now, and they kind of got all the kinks out of their system there, because there were a lot of accidents and rather embarrassing ones involving American troops that were inexperienced and hurriedly trained. And so a lot of accidents occurred there, and deaths. And for the first bit, as is typical with new soldiers, right, they get into the battle, the trouble starts happening, and troops will run. They'll drop their guns, and they will shoot too high because they're afraid to shoot at the enemy. But by this point in the war, it's like they had lost their freshness, and inexperience, and they were ready to go. They'd been battle hardened after incidents like Belle-Île Wood, and so that was when the Western Allies altogether began a major push. And the Canadians had the distinction of being the ones who were leading that charge. And it was, they called it the last 100 days. And basically, the Allies were moving forward, the German lines were collapsing, getting all rolled up. And yes, Ludendorff, the supreme commander of the German forces, he visited the front lines because the reports seemed conflicting. There were some reports that sounded honest and stark, and others that sounded like we're telling you what you want to hear, right? Things are good, things are fine. He visited the front, and it broke his heart. And apparently he had lost someone he's related to. Not a son, I don't think, but like a nephew. So yeah, he was brokenhearted and returned home, and that's when he and others within the command started saying, "We're going to lose. We're going to lose this war. We don't have enough supplies. We don't have enough ammo, and they are now crumbling our front lines." Anyway, but several more battles would happen before we got to November the 11th, when the ceasefire was declared, and the Canadians were securing the town in Belgium of Le Mans, which was the first town the British Expeditionary Force and Belgian forces, all their allies, lost. First battle against the German forces, and Sir Arthur Currie, leader of the Canadian Corps, the guy who was instrumental in securing Vimy Ridge with the Canadian Corps, he insisted on taking it. Anyway, while that was happening, though, just shortly before that, you still had major battles like the Battle of Passchendaele, and that is actually in Book 3. So we'll get to that one. It's called The Ghost Road, and appropriately named because it's now talking about, through the eyes of all the main characters, going back to the front and what that's like. Walking along the road that leads to the carnage in the front lines, and it's like, well, yeah, the lines have shifted so much back and forth. So what we're seeing here is also devastated. It's not like happy countryside and then suddenly muddy no man's land, open terrain. And you're reminded, the soldiers there marching along, they are reminded of all the death and all the, it's like I think I remember reading in there, it's like the ghosts, those who died at the front, are like coming this way, whereas the fresh meat is going that way. And they can't help but notice those poor sad ghosts, and who are equally depressed over the fact that they're looking at these poor, frightened young kids who may be joining them soon. Yeah. Okay, that got a little artistic and esoteric. It's typically what you say about art, right? Esoteric. So, yes, thank you for once again listening. I do recommend this book very much, it is kind of like the Dune series or others, or Foundation, others, where you're golden if you read the first book alone. But you should keep reading, because it's like, it goes places, it builds on it, it is good. And so this is definitely a trilogy worth exploring all the way to the end. Whew. Anyway, and I also recommend it because as a lover of history, especially in the periods in question here, the early 20th century, and just the two world wars, what happened between them, what happened after, and everything that precipitated and led up to them. That is really that's definitely my jam. And so if you too like that, and of course, they're not just dealing with official history lessons, right? The fact that they delve deep, the fact that Pat Barker delves deep and really looks at the undercurrent, you know, the secret stuff, the hidden stuff, the stuff that you would be surprised to know was always there. It's just it wasn't acknowledged. So we don't see it in the history books, but it's like, yeah, nobody talked about it. So pretty much everybody knew about it, but nobody talked about it. Just like, you know, scandals involving the church or residential schools or the Holocaust. And fortunately, yeah, it's like these things, those evils were exposed. Whereas these secrets, you know, which were rather harmless, person happens to be gay, yeah, they were kept hidden for fear of persecution and so forth. And yeah, in book 3 too, I will mention it. It gets into the background of Dr. Rivers, and it explores his time in the South Pacific. It's in Papua New Guinea, I believe. Back in the day when it used to be a colony. So yeah, you had British colonies there, Dutch colonies. The Germans also had some, a few in the Pacific that the remaining ones that they managed to seize up, and that is very interesting too. It gets sort of delving into colonialism from the other side. So yeah, each and every one of these books has got a lot going on, and only some of it is the military stuff. So trust me when I say there's something there for everyone. For the military historian, the political historian, the social historian, the cultural historian, sure. All of these things, or just anyone who happens to like these things, right? You don't have to be a historian for these to appeal to you. So yeah, full-on recommendation. And that's me done talking. Hope you all have a good weekend, and yeah, take care, and I'll see you next time with the Ghost Road. And after that, well, there are several titles I have mentioned. I'm going to have to get that sorted. So, yes, play it by ear. Okay? Peace out.